Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, and I am here in person with my co-host.
Wow, amazing. What a world we live in, kind of. I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, and you can email me at monster@nate.com.
And this is a weirdly appropriate episode for us to be returning to podcasting in person in studio with our producer, David Rosen, released from our captivity.
Yes.
Because this is a special bonus episode for our season on the films of 2003. And we are talking about Park Chan-wook's film Oldboy, a movie that, Jason, when we started this season, you were really eager to include this movie somewhere in our lineup. And so we're finally getting to it here in the bonus. And why was it so important to you to have this movie?
I think because it is, it's still perennially on the tongue of pop cultural enthusiasts and film fans. You know, this is one of those movies. Like, here's an example, and I'm not comparing it to this movie, but something like Boondock Saints, which has like a huge following and is still talked about in such a beloved fashion. I think it's got such a huge following that we had to do it. And it's kind of cool that it has such a huge following and it's a South Korean movie, as opposed to sometimes, you know, when we look at cult classics, which this has gone beyond a cult classic at this point, it's usually we're focused on American made movies.
Right. This is a movie that definitely reached beyond the borders and became a big sensation here in the US and remains so. Although weirdly, given how popular it still is, it was tough for us to watch this movie. It's not really available at the moment. It's not available to stream or to rent digitally. And the only DVD releases of it are out of print. So shout out to Chris Cranock, who maybe doesn't listen to this podcast, but
better now.
Yeah,
I think he's listened to a couple episodes.
All right, well, maybe he'll listen to this one. But friend of David Rosen and the podcast who loaned us a DVD to watch.
Well, Josh, you know what else is? It also fits great as a bonus episode for this season, because one of the themes we've come back to with movies like The Station Agent are films finding their audience on DVD through video stores, the last of the video stores, hurrah, right? And I think this is a perfect example of something where you would go into a video store and like the guy behind the counter would be like, dude, you got to see this gnarly movie and everything, you know?
Right. This is certainly a movie that, I mean, I think it did get a theatrical release in the US, but it would have been a limited thing. And it built that word of mouth through that limited release and through endorsements by people like Quentin Tarantino. And so people who may not have heard of this movie or might not have heard of Park Chan-wook would have gotten that, you know, word of mouth and would have rented it. I mean, that's certainly how I heard of it first, through, I didn't see it in the theater, but, you know, through some sort of, you know, the word of mouth or just reading an article or something like that. And it definitely built its following like that.
Yeah. And I'm sure this was like, if you were in college at the time and you were able to procure the DVD, this is like one that's going to make it all the way through room to room or watch parties or whatever. This is that type of film.
Right. You would be like, oh, dude, you got to watch this. This movie is so crazy. And that was definitely the reputation too. It was not just, this is a good movie. This movie is insane. You got to watch this insane movie.
And it is.
and it is.
Yeah.
But it did make some money, not only in Korea, but in the worldwide box office. It grossed $15 million total on its budget of $3 million. Not bad, especially for a non-American film, non-Hollywood film.
Yeah, it did all right. And it did fine in the US.
Yeah. I mean, for something on this level, it did fine in the US. It did very well in South Korea, where it was popular. It was the 5th highest grossing film of 2003 in South Korea. Very popular there. And it went to the Cannes Film Festival in 2004, where it won the Grand Prix, which is essentially second place, from the jury that was headed up by Quentin Tarantino, who was a big supporter.
He pushed for it to win the Palme d'Or. As you notice, Josh, when he speaks French, sounds so natural because he took French in high school.
Yeah, because 20 plus years ago, I took some classes.
No, say we were talking about like the Barcelona Film Festival, then I would be able to break out
you nailed that,
Spanish.
Jason.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
My Castilian accent. So.
Very, very good.
Josh, what won?
Oh, I didn't look that up.
I'll tell you what won the Palme d'Or. It was Michael Moore and Fahrenheit 9/11.
Oh, that's terrible. They should have given it to Oldboy.
Well,
Man.
I mean, politics were in the air, and
I
the
guess.
expose of Bush and weapons of mass destruction took home the big prize.
Yeah, well, I don't look forward to our season on 2004 when we have to talk about that movie.
That's just one movie, man. Come on, dude.
Yeah, whatever. I will say that Oldboy is a better movie than that, I think.
Here's what I want to say about Oldboy, like right off the bat, no matter what you feel about it, is you mentioned it's $3 million budget. This dude makes it look like it's a $70 million budget. I think whether you love it or hate it, like the production value is incredible on this thing.
Yeah, it looks amazing. And the style of it is something I think that caught people's attention a lot. And as much as anything else, as much as the story, which is crazy, or the acting, but just the visual style that Park Chan-wook brings that he then subsequently has brought to other films of his is really amazing.
Yeah, and that was the other reason I wanted to cover it, because of the influence of his style, his shooting style, his aesthetic. You see it in a lot of different films. And, a few years ago, or last year, or 2 years ago, whatever, when Parasite won, years run together right now, right? Like when Parasite won Best Picture. I'm not saying this is a direct influence on that, but the South Korean filmmakers are very meticulous and work really hard on just making shots count, and they're not only beautiful, but they enhance the story, and I think you see that here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even if this wasn't necessarily an influence on Parasite, I mean, the film industry there is not that big. Those filmmakers certainly are familiar with each other, influence each other.
If I'm not mistaken, he's one of the producers on Snowpiercer.
Yeah, exactly. So both of those, Bong Joon-ho, they have worked together on projects. So when this did make it to a larger release in the US, critics here generally were positive, although this is a movie you're saying, whether you love it or hate it, this is very much a love it or hate it movie. I feel like people either think this movie is brilliant or they think it's reprehensible. So, and that's a mark of an interesting film. But for the most part, critics were positive. Roger Ebert was a big fan. He said, Oldboy contains a tooth-pulling scene that makes Laurence Olivier's Nazi dentist in Marathon Man look like a healer. And there's a scene during which an octopus is definitely harmed during the making of the movie. These scenes do not play for shock value, but are part of the whole. Yes, the ending is improbable in its complexity, but it is not impossible, and it is not unmotivated. Oldboy ventures to emotional extremes, but not without reason. We are so accustomed to, quote, thrillers that exist only as machines for creating diversion that it's a shock to find a movie in which the action, however violent, makes a statement and has a purpose.
So, yes, violence with a purpose, and we've talked about that in a number of episodes. However, I do think Ebert's letting the ending off the hook a little, because he is clearly a fan. He gave it 4 out of 4 stars. If this was something that he didn't buy into, he would be like, now come on, Gene, now come on, so.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that ending is preposterous. And when he says it's not impossible, he's wrong. It is, in fact, impossible. And that's okay. I don't think that's necessarily bad, because you're right. If you're buying into the movie, if you're invested in it the whole time, if he's convinced you of this crazy world, then you'll go along with it through the ending. But if you're skeptical and you get to those twists, I can absolutely see people being like, that's the last straw. I'm out. I can't deal with this anymore.
I think you could probably at a number of different points, but definitely at the huge reveal at the end, that's that I think would definitely turn some people off, and sadly turn some people on.
Yeah, there's maybe some fetish subreddits directed. Let's move on from that. Karina Chicano in the Los Angeles Times said, hanging on a narrative as Byzantine and distorted as a festering grudge, the astonishingly visceral Oldboy plays like an extended adrenaline rush following a bad accident. At once real and completely unreal, familiar and deeply strange, violent and comically absurd, South Korean director Park Chan-wook's 4th movie releases a torrent of imagery as fluid and shifting as a nightmare. As much as it's about anything recognizable, Oldboy is a story about the transformative power of hatred and revenge. It says something when you come out of a film as weird and fantastical as Oldboy and feel that you've experienced something truly authentic. I just don't know what. I can't think of anything to compare it to. And I mean, it's not like this movie is so unique that it's not been influenced by anything or doesn't compare to anything, but it certainly is a unique experience.
I thought of the Scott Tenorman episode of South Park as one.
Sure you did.
Yeah.
I don't. Did that come before or after
I'm
this?
not sure, but that
Right
was
around, yeah.
definitely one of those like elaborate plots where you're messing with someone's familial ties the whole time.
That is true. That, I guess, may be an important legacy that we would not have otherwise considered.
But Josh, we should mention this is based on a manga.
A Japanese comic book series. Yes,
by Garson Tsushima, I think is how you pronounce his name.
I didn't take Japanese in high school, so
and illustrated by Nobuaki Minegishi. Sorry, guy. I tried. I'm trying to give you credit, but I am. I can't pronounce
right.
things.
No, but that is true. And I think I read somewhere, and I wasn't in one of these reviews, but somewhere else, I think it was actually in reference to the remake, someone saying, oh, Park Chan-wook gets so much credit here for this original vision. And it is, and I'm sure he deserves it, but it's not entirely that. It is an adaptation of something else.
Yeah. To adapt that is not easy. That's where I think the credit.
Right. And something this insane, which I mean, I haven't read. I actually looked to see if it was available on like Hoopla, the library system to read digitally, and it's not. So I don't know how the story compares to the source material, but if it's even close to this crazy, then yeah, that's a difficult thing to do.
You wouldn't necessarily read this and be like, yep, that's the movie.
Right.
That's the one we got to do. And then, we'll talk about it in the legacy, but you're referring to the American remake by Spike Lee.
Yes, that came in 2013. So not everyone liked it, but it's interesting. Like I was saying, I think even people who hate this are sort of like amazed by it. Lisa Schwartzbaum in Entertainment Weekly said, the brio and glee that Korean bad boy filmmaker Park Chan-wook brings to the gaudy psycho shockaroo Oldboy is undeniable, even impressive. It's the perverse, hard-boiled ugliness of the story to which Park has applied his talents that alienates me. For you, results may vary. Oldboy caused a love it or hate it stir at Cannes last year, and how could it not? It's an onslaught made to cause a sensation. Consider me simultaneously jolted and depressed. And I think a lot of the criticism is that this is sort of like empty style, and I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think there are strong themes here.
Yeah, and as you had mentioned in the review before about how far you'll go for revenge or for hate, or something like that. But yeah, I didn't think it was empty at all. It's just so fantastical and insane that I could, like we said, I can see people jumping off that Snowpiercer type train very early on,
Right. I mean, but it's certainly no more fantastical than, say, Snowpiercer, for to just pick another film by a South Korean filmmaker that's beloved and acclaimed.
Sure. I think what it is if we're going to go with that comparison, right? Snowpiercer's all on the train, and it's a very linear story in that regard, whereas this one, the first part and then the imprisonment of Ode-san, right, to when he gets out of prison, Ode-su, it changes a lot once he's out of prison. So I could see that as being an initial jolt, and then with those reveals towards the end, that's another jolt, So I can see where it's a little tougher to go along with that ride.
Yeah, I mean, and like you're saying before, if you're not all in on it, then the crazier it gets, the more it's gonna lose you. Instead of drawing you in more and making you think, wow, I was amazed and now I'm more amazed, it's gonna be the opposite.
Yeah, but you got to give this dude credit for going for it, man. So
you do.
I also really like the word shockaroo.
Yeah, that's a good film critic made up word right there.
That's great.
It is a shockaroo, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a shockaroo. This was my first time seeing it, actually. So
yeah, were you shockarooed?
I was, but I know I would have liked it more if I had seen it during the initial run, because it's tough to give you a shockaroo nowadays.
Yeah.
We've had so many shockaroos. The last year of our life has been one
big shockaroo.
Shockaroo. And sadly for many, an anti-mask shockaroo.
Oh,
right?
God.
So, but But you could see, like, I could see, especially if I was in the theater, like if I could see other people being turned off by this film, I think that would have made me be like, yeah, I like this one. Not that I didn't like it. I just thought like I was kind of in the middle. I wasn't love or hate on it.
Right, right. Yeah, I didn't get a chance to see it in the theater. I don't know if this played in a theater here in Vegas, if it got that level of release. But I did watch it at home. I don't remember exactly when, because it didn't hit the US until 2005. And so at some point after that, I rented it and watched it at home. And so I was maybe in the middle of that kind of situation where I didn't get to see it, early enough on to have that initial discovery experience, but it wasn't so well known yet that it was like, oh, I'm jaded about this necessarily.
Yeah, and that is not the fault of the film. I just think we've seen a lot like that in the last 15, 20 years.
Right. That happens.
When you saw it, when you went into the video store, did you say to the guy behind the counter, do you have anything that will give me a good shockaroo?
Well, I rented it from Netflix, so I spoke to no one.
That's about right.
Yeah. And Dave, you and I watched this together, and this was your first time on it as well, right?
Yeah, it was. And it's weird because it's one of those movies I was so sure I had seen because it was around my group of friends at this time as that crazy movie you have to see, like you guys were saying earlier. But once it started unfolding, I was like, oh, yeah, I've never seen this.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not something that you would forget,
Right.
I don't think. I mean, I didn't necessarily remember every beat of the plot, but I knew the crazy stuff that was coming.
Sure.
So any other background you want to add on this film, Jason?
Let's see, Josh. There was also a Hindi remake that was going to be a lawsuit over it because they never really credited or bought the rights to it. But that never really happened. It's part of a trilogy, the Vengeance trilogy.
Right.
Park Chan-wook's Vengeance trilogy. Have you ever seen the first or the third in that trilogy? Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance or Lady Vengeance?
I've seen Lady Vengeance, which was the one that came after this. And I was going to try to maybe watch Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, which unlike Oldboy is available easily to watch in many places. And I just didn't get around to it. But, I've seen several of his other films as well. But he's he likes the vengeance. Those films are not, they're just thematically related. They're not plot related.
Sure. The only other cool thing I noted was that on the soundtrack, every song is named after a film, and a lot of them are named after noir films. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, this is a sort of a noir in a weird, twisted way. And we haven't even really gotten to all the details of the plot here. If you haven't seen this movie, just well, I guess it's tough to see, but I was going to say, just see it first.
Watch it. And when we come back, we'll give our thoughts, which will contain shockaroo spoilers.
Yeah.
I was going to say, find a film nerd and ask him if you could borrow it from him. Most likely he has it.
Yeah, we'll give out Chris Cranach's phone number in a little bit. We'll come back and give our general thoughts on Oldboy. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this special bonus episode of our season on the films of 2003, we're talking about Park Chan-wook's Oldboy. And as we mentioned earlier, this is a movie that Jason was adamant that we needed to include in this season. So did it live up to your hopes for it?
It didn't underwhelm me. I didn't love it, like I said. Yeah, I stick with the decision. I think it was a really good decision to include this in the 2003 season, not just because of what it is as a film, but because of what it meant as a film in 2003.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. And I think I maybe liked it more than you did. And this is one of those movies, even though, as I said, the first time I saw it, I wasn't so jaded about its existence that I lost something, but it definitely was hyped. And I think I was maybe like, oh, that's what it is, a little bit. And now coming back to it a second time and not having those same expectations, I think I maybe liked it a little more.
Sure. One thing that's tough for me in films, it either works really well or you're kind of like, man, that's a slog, is when there's a long explanation about a plot device or revenge, a plan that they've set up. And this was a really long explanation with flashbacks and picture reveals. And I was just like, that was not, while I enjoyed what the reveal turned out to be, I didn't think the way they revealed it was maximized to its potential.
Yeah, I guess so. But I feel like the reveals or the explanation is so crazy that it's almost as insane watching that and seeing the dominoes fall of every new thing that is revealed about why Odesu was imprisoned and why he was released and what's been happening, as it is watching the crazy violent scenes that are stylistically impressive.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to talking about that. But here are the spoilers. Let's give them the plot, the little rundown, Josh.
Can you summarize the plot of this movie?
Here's what I can say. He was somewhat of a drunk and a carouser and a wild man.
Yeah, not a great father, not a great husband.
And I don't know. Yeah, and well, he must have been a carouser because at one point they said he slept with 250 women, right? So he ends up one night after a drunken stand in the police department, which is a very great opening. I love that kind of jump cutty sequence and what happens with him. He ends up just vanished, and then we see he's in a prison, and he doesn't know how long he's there, why he's there, or what's going on. And as we learn, this prison run by Mr. Park is a private prison where you can pay to have your enemies imprisoned or anyone imprisoned, right?
And it looks like a hotel almost, not like a prison. So much.
He's got a room, he's got a shower, he's got a TV. But it is a prison. That's
right.
all
He can't leave. He
Yeah.
can't leave. Yeah.
So, and he's in there for 15 years, and we see him go crazy and learn to accept it and then train to fight and all this stuff. And then a woman hypnotizes him, and then he's on top of a roof and he's out of the prison, right? And
this is a very concise.
Well, I mean, you can't.
That's what I'm saying. It's hard to just like give the beats of it.
If you leave out the hypnotism, you leave out a major
Well, that's how the
plot point.
twist goes.
Right.
Yeah.
So now he is out and he's looking for the vengeance.
He's looking for the vengeance. Yes.
Which
that was
could
the
be part
original
4.
title. Yeah.
So, right. He's looking for vengeance. Who imprisoned him? Why? And he ends up at this restaurant. And Mido, right? Is that her name? She's a younger woman, either
chef.
A chef there.
She's like a famous chef,
right?
Actually.
She's one of the great female chefs of Korea.
Yes.
And she ends up taking him in and like kind of helping him get his life together. But it's very weird sometimes because like she's like in the bathroom and he goes and he like kisses her and she's like, no, you can't do that. I am interested in you, but you can't do that, you know. And then they develop this romance, and there are all these like, you know, you have to find this guy, then you have to find this guy, then you have to find this guy type thing till we get to the big ending where we find out who imprisoned him. And Josh, you get to take this part.
Yeah. So the person who imprisoned him is a former schoolmate of his. In Oldboy, the title refers to sort of the like fight song of the school where they went to. They were the Old Boys.
Yeah.
And
Lee Woo-jin.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Odesu was, you know, he was kind of a dick back in the day.
Who wasn't?
And I guess, I mean, not enough to be kidnapped and imprisoned for 15 years.
That would be a bit.
Yeah. But he spied on Lee
Woo-jin and his sister.
He spied on him and his sister getting it on. And then spread the word that had happened, which was true. So, I mean, really, you can't entirely fault him. It's not like he spread false rumors.
Yeah, I think Lee Woo-jin's thing is like you caused her mind to break to the point where she believed she was pregnant.
Right. So this kind of drove her crazy as she was tormented because of it. She thought she was pregnant, which that was not true. And eventually she killed herself. She threw herself off a bridge. And so Lee Woo-jin has decided to get revenge for his sister. And to do so, he kidnaps Odesu, hypnotizes him, as we said, and
imprisons him for 15
imprisons him for 15 years, hypnotizes him so that he can wait 15 years so that Odesu's daughter is now grown up and has also been hypnotized. And that is Mido.
Yeah.
And that is the big reveal, that they have been hypnotized into having this relationship so that his revenge for his incestuous relationship being revealed is to kind of force Odesu into his own incestuous relationship.
Mido and Odesu have a sex scene, and it's like, you know, Mido's like, I'll do anything. I want to make you happy and this and that. And, you know, is what we think is a natural love story before we know that their relationship.
Although, as you're saying, there's a lot of weird moments that you make you wonder what kind of love story is this?
Yeah, and we find out they've both been hypnotized to fall for each other. And then, that happens, and then it just gets crazier from there. Like, you would think that's the craziest part, but no, it gets crazier.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously this breaks Odesu, which is the point. The revenge is successful in that sense. He's completely broken. He's begging. He doesn't want Mido to know. He cuts out his tongue so that he can't talk about it.
After he promises to be a dog.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. So he's really debasing himself. And Lee Woo-jin has gotten his revenge and thus satisfied, kills himself.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Odesu goes to see the hypnotist in the snow.
Yeah. Yeah. That the whole scene is a question of whether that is even really happening.
Right. And then we can get to that too. And he wants to be hypnotized to not remember who Mido is. He wants to know who Mido is, but not their relationship.
Right. So that they can have, and it's interesting that he asks for that so that they can have their romantic relationship rather than asking for sort of the romance to be erased so they can have a father-daughter relationship.
Yeah. Also, the whole thing, and like you said, is did it happen? Does he ask for it? Does it work?
Right. And there's that last shot with this expression on his face, and it's not clear. It would, to me at least, looking at that, like if he's happy because he's blissfully unaware, or if he's just kind of trying to convince himself that it's worked, or it's left ambiguous there at the end.
Or either way, is it that Mido doesn't know?
Right. Well, she definitely doesn't know because no one has told her.
Right.
He's made sure that no one tells her.
Yeah.
But he knows, and if he's going to try to go back to her and be in love with her with the knowledge that she's his daughter, he's going to be tortured for the rest of his life.
Dave, what did you think when this all unfolded?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was completely a fucked up ending that just goes as far as can possibly go with its conceit of this incestuous relationship and getting revenge for that with another one. And I love the ending. I just think it's one of those endings not too dissimilar from another movie we talked about, Paris, Texas, where it's like, as it's unfolding, the explanation for why this has all happened, you're just like, holy shit, like this is nuts,
I think it's more nuts than Paris, Texas.
I think so
it's definitely more nuts. I don't think anything is more nuts than this. So.
Well, I think Park Chan-wook has tried.
Yeah, this might be the most. If you'd really have to think about, like, what is a more nuts ending than this?
Yeah. But I mean, I feel like that we've now gone through the whole plot, but maybe now we should sort of backtrack and, talk about what we liked about, the earlier parts of the film, what stood out to you.
Yeah. In the prison, I thought all the stylization in the prison was great. That, what it's most famous for is that single take fight sequence, which is jaw dropping, right? That was one that, took 17 takes, 3 days. They filmed this whole beautiful tracking shot moving back and forth with Odesu, and he's fighting like 20, 30 thugs, right? It's an incredible, master shot, right? So, I like the style the whole time. The story kind of up and down, just depended where we were. And, so that's kind of where I'm at with it. So, and the whole thing where in the apartment where he finally does get to, Lee Woo-jin, I kind of felt that was a letdown of the momentum. Although I was incredibly impressed with Lee Woo-jin, played by Ji-tae. That yoga pose he does looks so difficult. So
yeah, I mean, he certainly has put his time to use in his own way. And speaking of his apartment, I mean, again, this is kind of toward the end, but what an amazing apartment that dude lives in.
Yeah.
With the weird shower in the middle that's like a cube that opens, and his closet is also that, and has got canals in it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure it's not a real apartment, but yeah.
That guy's done well for himself.
He has. Yeah. We don't,
other than, sexing his sister. And,
and
also the thing is, she did kill herself, but he did have a hold of her,
right? He kind of, you wonder, he let go to some degree, and we can say he's done well for himself because he's obviously very wealthy and he has this fancy apartment and all these minions, but he's spent the last 15 years as tormented as Odesu has,
Right.
with being consumed with this revenge.
See, Dave, Odesu was in an actual prison, whereas the other character was in the prison of his mind.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, I think that's one of the central themes here. And we realize that, of course, that, he gets his revenge and he succeeds. So many revenge movies are about an attempt to get revenge that fails, but he gets exactly what he wanted. And there's nothing left in his life. He just immediately kills himself.
He does go too far, though, with this revenge. Like, I get it. Like, telling people that
I get it. You had sex with your sister.
You wouldn't want people to know.
Right.
That's not something you want publicized. Josh, you have a sister.
Let's just stop right there. Let's just don't speak anymore.
But I mean, he did, like you said, he told people, but he wasn't lying, So he didn't start a mean rumor. He just started a truth rumor.
Right, not even a rumor. It's the truth.
He just gossiped about something that was true.
Yeah.
Hey guys, guess what I saw? Hey fellow old boys, guess what I just saw?
Right. But no, I mean, all I mean is that, like, yes, obviously he went very too far, but his plan worked. Everything that he planned to do, he succeeded at, was the point.
Yeah, I mean, think of how meticulous you have to be to imprison a man for 15 years, get a hypnotist to sign on to this plan. Like, how's that conversation go? Is she just
he paid her a lot of money, presumably.
Yeah, I mean, as a hypnotist, though,
it's a challenge.
It's not like you have HIPAA, but you think you have some type of oath, maybe not the Hippocratic oath.
Right. Most hypnotist are ethical. We wouldn't expect Anthony Cools to be doing this.
Maybe now Anthony Cools, a Las Vegas famous hypnotist and anti-masker who just lost his.
Oh, is he? Oh, well.
His show just got canceled.
Right.
By Caesar. So maybe
he's open to it now. Yeah.
Maybe if you want to make someone incest their family member, call Anthony Cools.
A gig is a gig.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just saying that, like, maybe most people are ethical on this, but the other thing about it is, like, it's one thing to hypnotize someone to, like, act like a chicken, but to hypnotize them for, like, a period of years to fall in love with their daughter, like, that's got to be a challenge. As a hypnotist, you might be like, you know what? I'd like to see if I can do this, just to see if it's possible.
You're right. But imagine making that happen and making him act like a chicken at the same time.
I mean, he does act like a dog, as you pointed out.
That would be another way to remake this. In the American remake, which I did not watch, they could have been in Vegas and they could have brought these two on stage and, like, when I snap my fingers, you two will have sex with each other. And when I snap my fingers again, you'll snap out of it and realize like you're having sex with each other, even though you're father and daughter.
They should add that to the Vegas stage hypnotist shows.
Anthony Cools, I think we just pitched your
show.
I
mean, maybe if he had done that, his show wouldn't have gotten canceled. But yes, obviously it's ridiculous. And I don't think this is really possible via hypnotism, even with the most talented hypnotist.
I'm going to lay off because I haven't studied it enough to know.
Okay. And I think it's probably not something that they're going to, like, try to see if it works, just to, find
was
out.
any, like, budding hypnotist inspired by this?
I hope not. Jesus.
I really should give this a try.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about the fetish aspect, and that might go along with it. But let's move on.
Josh, what was the most unsettling part for you? Was it the incest, the cutting your own tongue out, or the aforementioned the teeth being pulled out by a hammer? That looked very painful.
It did. I think the cutting of the tongue is the thing that I'm, like, most viscerally, like, recoiling, and you think of it happening to you. But I mean, that's one thing this movie does really well, is that it's very visceral, as I think one of those.
That's the right word.
Yeah, and when that stuff happens, you're like, it really gets you. I mean, there's scene one of the more famous scenes here, of course, of Odesu eating the live octopus, and I mean, that's not even gory, but just watching him, like, chomp down on that.
Yeah,
and and that's early in the movie, right after he's been released. And he walks into that restaurant and he says to Mito, "I want to eat something alive," or something like. And you're like, you're like, this is a hardcore movie,
Yeah.
And this is a hardcore guy,
But I mean, that makes sense to me at that point in time with where he's at. And, I mean, as he mentions, those fried dumplings only go take you so
eating
far.
dumplings for 15 years.
Right. And no, I mean, I think that's good, but I think it gives you a real sense of what kind of movie this is and what kind of person he is and how sort of grimly determined he's going to be for the rest of the movie to get his revenge.
Right. And it's that type of thing that makes him feel anything, right?
Right. Because he's just been sort of numbed as he's been in this prison all this time. And he's got those scars on his knuckles from punching the wall so much. And, he can barely feel anything. One thing I liked that I think I kind of forgot about is this movie is also like funny in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that, especially the beginning. The movie opens with this sort of flash forward of Odesu on the roof where he's released. And there's this random guy who's about to jump. And he's grabbed this guy and stopped him from jumping and says, I'm going to tell you my story. And then we flash back and see his whole, the history of him being imprisoned. And I thought his whole interaction with that guy is funny because he tells the guy this insane story of his own life, right? And then he kind of feels better, it seems like, or he feels like he's cleared his head and he's got purpose. And then he's like, okay. And the guy's like, now let me tell you why I want to kill myself. And he just walks away. And then he just leaves this guy there. And as he's walking out of the building, you see the guy who decided to jump and he just falls off the building right onto a car.
And the shot of Odesu holding the guy, stopping him from jumping off the building, is mimicked by the flashback with Lee Woo-jin holding on to his sister, trying to get her not to jump off the bridge.
Right.
Which isn't funny, but it's
no, that isn't. But I just thought that was, and that's like, fairly early in the film. And just like him asking to eat something alive, his clear disregard for this poor suicidal guy is also gives you a sense of how sort of single-minded he's become, that he just wants to unburden himself of his story. And once he's done that, he doesn't care what happened to this guy. He doesn't care if this guy jumps off a roof. This guy's life means nothing to him.
Meh.
Exactly. That's how he feels.
Right. So, I mean, that's how it goes sometimes, fellas.
Sometimes some crazy guy emerges from a box, tells you an insane story, and then you jump off a roof. That's just sometimes what happens.
I mean, what would you eat the first time after 15 years other than a live octopus?
Would it be have to be alive?
A Pop's cheesesteak?
Would it be alive?
I mean, I like pizza. That's my favorite food.
Yeah.
What about you?
I honestly, that's a good choice. I think I'd go with that too.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that or a burger.
Yeah.
That used to be alive.
Yeah,
right.
That's true.
So
wouldn't
work as well if Odesu ate pizza though.
Josh, I wanted to mention Chung Chung-hoon, who's the director of photography. Pretty masterful here.
Yeah, it's beautiful, as you're saying. And not only that like single take tracking shot with him fighting all those guys, but everything in this movie is just very, very beautiful.
Meticulous.
Yeah.
And like I said, the setups, the style adds to the story as opposed to takes away from it. And then we got to at least, we mentioned Odesu so much. Choi Min-sik is the actor who, when you talk about like the De Niro's and the guys, like imagine doing this character and then having to like go back to normal life after this.
Yeah, this is an intense role and he's great in it. And I mean, just as anything else, as we're saying, like this movie is so crazy that you need to buy into it in order to like it.
If he doesn't commit, then there's no movie.
Right. And he does. And he shows you that evolution. You see, you're talking about that first scene where Odesu is just this kind of like drunk idiot in the police station, and the evolution of him as a character over the course of him being imprisoned and over the course of his then quest for revenge as he goes through all these emotions and this intensity. There's a huge journey there that he really brings you on.
Yeah. So should we rate this thing?
Yeah.
Let's do it out of 5 live octopi.
I was just gonna say that. So we're on the same wavelength here.
Yeah, it got 3 from me right down the middle. Didn't love it, didn't dislike it at all. Glad I watched it. I know people are going to be out there like, only 3. Blah. Go to a hypnotist.
Maybe you should go to a hypnotist and hypnotize yourself into liking this movie.
No, I'm glad I watched it and I maintain its worth in our season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad we watched it and we talked about it. I'd seen it before. Like I said, I maybe liked it a little. I think I maybe gave it a 3 out of 5 the first time. I'm going to bump it up to 3.5. I think I could just appreciate the style and the acting and sort of those elements more this time because I knew what was coming rather than just being on the edge of my seat like, what? So, but yeah, I think this is a great movie. And I think also it's a shame that it's unavailable because people should be able to see this. And I don't know what the deal is with that if the rights are tied up or what, but somebody should get on that and put it out there.
Yeah. Dave, before you rate it, I just want to say one thing, because we mentioned Snowpiercer and Parasite, and Bong, when he won the Oscar, had said one really insightful thing, maybe many insightful things, but one was, he said, because they talked about how maybe a lot of Americans don't go for foreign films, and he said, you can just get past that 1-inch barrier. There's a whole world of amazing film out there, and that you should never let subtitles deter you from watching a movie. This was our first bonus episode we did on a foreign film, and it just makes you want to watch more South Korean cinema at this point.
Yeah, and that's great. I would definitely recommend, if you can't see this, see other Park Chan-wook movies, see other South Korean movies. There's tons of great stuff. So Dave, how many octopi do you want to rate this?
I'm going with 4, guys. I loved it. Just so fucked up. And I mean, that subway fight alone was just
classic. That's
classic.
incredible.
Yeah.
You would put that on a highlight reel of anything in film history as hey, here's an example of the power of the medium.
Yeah, I mean, and certainly as much as Park Chan-wook has done great stuff, that is certainly one of the great things that he'll always be remembered for. But we'll talk more about other things he might be remembered for in a moment when we get to the legacy of Oldboy. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year in this special bonus episode of our season on the films of 2003. We have been talking about Park Chan-wook's totally insane film Oldboy. And as far as the legacy, we've talked about this a bit, the way that this movie kind of made its way to the US and built this word of mouth and this critical acclaim. And I think was one of the earliest South Korean movies to really break big here. And I think in a lot of ways, this movie opened the floodgates for more of those, leading all the way up to Parasite winning Best Picture.
Yeah, I think you're right, Josh. And now, as you said, the floodgates are open. So keep bringing them over and keep watching them, people.
Yeah, there's tons. Do you have any other favorites, Jason, South Korean films?
I mean, I think I like Snowpiercer better than Parasite. Snowpiercer is probably my favorite one, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Bong Joon-ho, hugely talented. I like Park Chan-wook a lot. I've seen quite a few of his other films. As far as his Korean films, I love The Handmaiden. Is another movie with insane twists that it just piles one on the other, and you get to the middle of the movie, and you're like, oh, this is the twist, but no, there's 10 more.
That's
twists.
good. Maybe Dave and I'll watch that one.
Yeah, that's a great movie. That's I think that's an Amazon original here in the US, so very easy to watch. I also like Thirst a lot, his vampire movie that he made in 2009.
Well, you said of Korean language films, dude. Stoker, his English language debut, that's a great movie. And then again, another mental a mind game, shall we call it? So.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I think Stoker is great, and he's been working both in English and Korean over the last few years. He directed The Little Drummer Girl, which is a spy miniseries, John le Carré series.
Oh, yeah, I'm totally going to watch it. As you friends here know, I love British limited series, which is kind of what that is. Right?
Yeah, it's limited. It's not. It has some British people in it, so it was good. I think I hoped for more from something like that directed by Park Chan-wook. It's a little more straightforward than I was hoping for, but Florence Pugh is really good as the lead in that. So. Yeah. And he has another Korean film, I think, that's finished, that's on the way, and also recently signed for another English language miniseries.
Yeah, so it's called Decision to Leave, which is the movie that's done. And The Sympathizer, which is an adaptation of a book, sounds really interesting. As far as what I read, it's about a North Korean who implants himself in a South Korean community in the US and is kind of telling that story, So that sounds great. That's going to be an A24 limited series, I think.
Yeah, I hope that's good. And I hope maybe he brings more of his style to it than he brought to The Little Drummer Girl, which again is decent, but it doesn't feel like his vision as much.
As opposed to Stoker, which is totally off.
Yeah. I mean, and even though he didn't write Stoker, I mean, it seemed like he brought more to it.
Yeah, something interesting about that is he used a translator on the set. So that's pretty interesting that he was able to capture whatever emotion that he thought he needed from the actors without understanding the words.
Yeah, and I wonder about that, if over time, now that he's worked on more of these English language projects, if he speaks English better, because I think sometimes I do think Stoker is great, but if there's that barrier to sort of communicating with your collaborators, it makes it more difficult.
In any language.
Yeah,
of course.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then we mentioned the remake.
The two remakes,
Yes.
Hindi, which none of us have seen.
No, and I was looking, that actually is available on Amazon Prime. I assumed it was not here in the US, but it is. It's called Zinda. And yeah, it was funny, because as you said, there was a lawsuit because it wasn't an official remake. And I read that, and then the lawsuit was dismissed or it was dropped. And I thought, oh, maybe it wasn't very similar. And then I went to Wikipedia and read the plot summary, and it is the exact same
the
plot.
company that made Zinda went out of business, so there was no way to continue the lawsuit.
Oh, okay, but it's still available. Like, somebody's making money off of it.
Josh, as you know from our 1989 bonus episode, Do the Right Thing, I'm a huge Spike Lee fan. I think we're all Spike Lee fans. You watched this remake, correct?
I did, yeah. And this, it's weird because it has such a bad reputation in sort of two ways. One, as like a bad remake of this movie that people love, of Oldboy. And also, I think it's usually regarded as Spike Lee's worst film. And so I expected it to just be horrible. And it's not that bad. I think that's about the best that I can say for it. It doesn't feel like a Spike Lee movie in any way. It feels like a generic kind of Hollywood take on this story. And it follows the plot pretty faithfully. It changes a couple things at the end. It stars Josh Brolin as the Odesu character, Joe Doucette, which they try to get to like cadence of that. Because one thing we didn't mention in Oldboy, they say Odesu like constantly.
Yeah.
So Joe Doucette and Elizabeth Olsen as his daughter that he has sex with. So, and they keep that aspect. It's weird. They keep that aspect, the sort of incest aspect, but they get rid of the hypnotism. So it's just like the circumstances have been engineered for them to hook up. And yeah, it's weird. And it's also weird because like Spike Lee he recreates that fight scene. He does it in a single take in a slightly different way. And I feel like if you'd never seen the original, you might be like, oh, this is cool. But having seen the original, watching that scene, it's just like he's going through the motions,
Well, we talked about one of those shots in Do the Right Thing where he's traversing the street and he's going from character to character in a single take. So if anyone can do it, it's him, right? But what's interesting about your take on that is I think some of look, he's in a hot streak right now. He's in a great groove with what he's been putting out. But there was a time where like some of his originals, I felt like kind of weren't as good as like his earlier stuff. But his director for hire work was incredible in like the 90s and there are 2000s between like Clockers and Inside Man and stuff. So this would seem like a good fit for him, but maybe it just is a bad idea. When something's so crazy, maybe you just got to leave it and just like either watch it or you don't, but we don't need to Americanize or make a Bollywood version of it.
Right. I mean, and I don't know like how one would approach that Spike Lee version if you've never seen the original or aren't familiar with the original, if you would find the plot twists as crazy and as engrossing, if you would buy into it. I like Josh Brolin. I feel like he doesn't give the level of performance that Choi Min-sik does to really immerse you in it. Charlton Copley plays the villain and is terrible, but in a very amusing way, which I think is the best you can say for him in any movie because he's a terrible actor. But he puts on this weird like Christopher Lee accent almost, like he's like British upper class for no reason that is ever explained in the movie, and dresses kind of like a vampire. And so when he comes in, it's amusing in a sort of campy way.
Yeah.
And Samuel L. Jackson, who plays the guy who runs the prison, is also clearly just kind of hamming it up. And so they're kind of amusing, but the more serious aspects of the story don't really work.
I mean, to me, I would watch it only if I was like, I need to be a completist for the Spike Lee catalog.
Right. And I think that's mostly why anyone is watching it, because people love Spike Lee. And he's so prolific. I mean, there's so many movies of his, and this is probably at the bottom of the list. But if you're going to watch them all, then, people get around to it.
Yeah, I think I would if that was the case.
Yeah, but I can't really recommend it. Choi Min-sik is a huge star in South Korea. He's, the biggest name in this film, and he continues to work there. He was in the American film Lucy, with
Yeah.
Scarlett Johansson, but otherwise just, works in Korea. And why should he be in an American movie? He doesn't need to be.
That was all right, wasn't it? Lucy, I don't.
It's
Was it just
the Luc Besson movie where she has like superpowers for some reason.
I feel like it was like all right, but
So anything else you want to add about the legacy of this film, Jason?
Josh, I think we covered this, and I'm good on this one. Oh, I do want to say, did you know who was originally supposed to remake it in the English language?
Oh, I saw it's Steven Spielberg, which is an even weirder choice than Spike Lee.
Starring
Will Smith.
Yeah, which doesn't seem like either one would make the choice to be a part of that.
No. And as misguided as the version is that we got, I feel like that could have even been worse.
Especially if Will Smith cast Willow Smith.
Let's just no more. That's end of episode. So that's Oldboy, and that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. Check us out on social media.
We're on social media. Like I said, you could email us at monster@nate.com. Reference to the film there, Josh. I'm Jason Harris Comedy at Facebook and Instagram. J Harris Comedy on Twitter. Go for jason.com. Looks like it belongs in one of those old internet cafes like here in Oldboy. We're at awesomemovieyear.com, Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram, Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter. Thanks everyone for listening to this cool season. We had fun.
We did. I'm at joshbellhateseverything.com, where I think you can maybe find something I wrote about Oldboy like 15 years ago. So that's fun.
It's the last entry in the website.
Yeah, no, there's it's only been like 3 or 4 months since I ever put something there. But you can find more recent content from me on social media at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook and at Signal Bleed on Twitter. And you can listen to our producer David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow us on social media at Piecing Pod.
And if you're listening to this on Patreon, all 1 to 4 of you, maybe something like that.
Go up 1 from there.
Oh, all right. Well, the small but dedicated following there, we very much appreciate it. And if you're listening to this later on, check out the Patreon, where we will have other bonus content from Awesome Movie Year, as well as from Piecing It Together and Dave's awesome music career. That is patreon.com/
By David Rosen.
By David Rosen.
Should be for David Rosen, because you and I don't see any money from it.
I don't know if anyone sees any money from
true.
it. It all goes back to Patreon, I think. It's a scam, really. But thank you to everyone who has signed up for that. We do appreciate the support. And thanks to Chris Cranock for giving us the movie.
And Dave's cat for making this incredibly difficult during this podcast, our first time back together.
Yeah.
And just running around the room and knocking stuff over. And
we missed that, didn't we?
That was nice.
Yeah. So check out, if you've been listening, we have our new season going on the films of 1967. Give that a listen. And thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.